Welcome to Skype Academy presents Cloud PBX with PSTN Calling. Before we get into the content of this training, please allow me to start with a quick disclaimer. Office 365 and Skype for Business Online iterate very quickly. We add features and functionality on a constant base. So by the time you're watching this training, it might be already outdated. So please get sure to go to aka.ms/sa-pstn to the latest version of this training. This is the January 2017 version of this recording. My name is Thomas Binder. I'm a Senior Program Manager in the Customer Experience and Deployment team. Today, we are going to start talking about Cloud PBX with PSTN calling benefits. So why do you even want to use that feature? Then we will go into calling plans, the different options that you have to buy minutes from Microsoft. We will be talking about phone numbers and how you can port these phone numbers. Then we will follow with emergency service dialing. We will take a look at Cloud PBX with PSTN calling in action so that you can see what the actual experience is if you configure Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. And then we'll talk about a few operational considerations. Finally, we will conclude with a summary and resources. The key learnings of today's training include Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is a service provided by Microsoft. Microsoft will be your one-stop shop for your PSTN needs, providing you the phone number and full service. Also, it's important to always keep in mind that our service innovates on a constant basis. So we are adding not only features, but new countries on a regular basis, and you want to check back every now and then to find out if new countries and features have been added. As I said before, this training will be refreshed if there are any changes in the feature sets. Also, you want to keep in mind that networking is super important. From your users to Office 365, you need to get sure that there is a good network performance so that they will have a good user experience. Please leverage the Skype operations framework for our network readiness assessment. Links can be found in our resources section. In terms of scope, you might have seen this diagram before. It shows you all the available trainings and topics around Cloud PBX. Every white box is a training that you can consume via Skype Academy. The blue boxes are just here to provide more structure to how the trainings are related to each other. So you can see at the top, there's the Cloud PBX introduction, and then we have different topics around PSTN connectivity, about features, about networking. Today, we will be talking about Cloud PBX with PSTN calling, which is one of the PSTN connectivity options. The idea is really that we want you to understand what PSTN calling is, how to configure it, what the benefits are, and what you need to consider. Out of scope is the introduction on what Cloud PBX means. If you don't know yet, I highly recommend to watch the Cloud PBX introduction. And we are not going any deep on any of the features like voicemail, auto and call queues, because for all of them, there are dedicated trainings. Same applies to networking. While networking is super important in this context, there are dedicated trainings available. And we will point you to those trainings in the resources section. Cloud PBX with PSTN calling benefits. The benefits of Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is that everything you get will be provided directly by Microsoft. So you have one bill for all your communications. You have one portal where you do all your configuration. You will have a seamless user experience. So Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is really the easiest and best way to deliver PSTN connectivity to your Cloud PBX users. Also, Cloud PBX with PSTN calling will give you flexibility for your phone numbers. You can get either new numbers from Microsoft or you can port your existing numbers. And we will cover both in more detail later in this session. It's easy to manage. All your configuration is in one central place. All your support comes from one central place. All you need to do is you need to talk to Microsoft. There's no need for any servers on-premise, no need for any software on-premise. There's no PBX, no gateway, no session border controls to manage. It is just what you get from Skype for Business Online. So when do you want to use Cloud PBX with PSTN calling? Well, you want to use it if the users are located in one of the regions where Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is available, and if there's no need to keep an existing infrastructure. So if you have already a PBX, if you are already integrated with Skype for Business, if you have long-term contracts that you need to continue leveraging, then Cloud PBX with PSTN calling might not be the best option for you yet until these contracts run out. But it is really the ideal situation for greenfield. If you have a new office, or if you have a PBX or any contracts that are end of life anyway, and you want to decommission your PBXs, then Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is the ideal solution because you won't need any PBXs anymore. So this is a high-level overview, and it should just help you to understand. We have here on the very left side the endpoints. You can see a laptop that runs a Skype for Business client. You can see an IP phone, and they will connect to Office 365, to the Microsoft Cloud, to Skype for Business Online, and we will connect then to the PSTN to give you PSTN calling services. And it's important to understand that in this scenario, both the signaling and the media go from your premises, from where your users are located, to Office 365. So, networking considerations. Networking is super important because it will directly impact the user experience. If you have a bad network connection, if there's any jitter, any packet loss, if there's too much delay, users will not have a good user experience. And if you think about it, the network from the users in your company to the PSTN, to Office 365, there are in general 3 networks involved. On the very left side, the first box represents the on-premises network. The network that you have in your office, the wireless and wired network that users use to connect to your company network. From your company network, we see the next box, it's the interconnect network to Office 365. So this is usually your internet service provider who connects all your traffic to Office 365. And then on the very right side, we have Office 365, where all the services are located, Cloud Voice, PSTN conferencing, and so on. You are responsible for the on-premises network because this is something that you manage, that you control, and you are also as a customer responsible for the interconnect network. You select the ISP you want to work with. And you need to get sure that both these networks provide a quality, a performance that is good enough to have this real-time communication. There is detailed planning guidance available, and I want to point you here to the Skype Operations Framework. There's a section called Network Readiness Planning, and it will tell you in every detail about the requirements and how you can plan for Skype for Business Online and how you can test your network. So I highly recommend to consume that content. You can find the link in the resources section of this presentation. So where can you get PSTN calling services at the moment? Today, it's available in France, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and in Puerto Rico. It's important also to understand the feature availability is depending on the defined user location, not where you created your tenant. So you can create a tenant in a different country. Maybe you created your tenant in Austria, but then you have users in France, in the US, in UK, in Puerto Rico. So these users has a defined user location, and you will be able to give these users Cloud PBX with PSTN calling service. In addition to the countries where it is already available, we also have Spain in preview. If you have users in Spain and you are interested in enabling these users, please go to skypepreview.com. You can sign up and you can get early access to that feature to enable users in this country. Also, in the future, we will continue adding countries. You will learn about it first at skypepreview.com. For the latest information, because training might be outdated at the time you're watching it, please go to aka.ms/cloudpbx-availability to learn in which countries and regions Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is available. Calling plans. So your users will need PSTN calling plans that determine how many minutes they can dial, either domestically or international. There are two options how you can assign PSTN calling plans to users. They have either an E5 license, which means since it is E5, it already includes Cloud PBX, or they have an E3 license plus the Cloud PBX license, and then you can add a PSTN calling plan license to that. And there are two different calling plans. The one is domestic, where users can just dial phone numbers within the country, and the other one is domestic and international, where we support calling into more than 190 countries, including landline and mobile. And again, the link aka.ms/cloudpbx-availability has a complete list of countries where you can call to. But remember, 190, it's a lot, so most countries are on the list. So how many minutes are included in a PSTN calling plan? Before we get into the specific minutes, let me tell you that we count only outbound minutes. Inbound minutes are always free. So if your user is being called, you don't need to pay for that at all. The number of minutes that a user gets per month depends on the location and on the calling plan. As said before, there's a domestic and international calling plan. If your users are in the US or in Puerto Rico, they will get for domestic calling 3,000 minutes. And if they have also an international calling plan, they will get on top of the 3,000 domestic minutes, 600 minutes for international calling. Users in the UK and France, they will get 1,200 minutes for domestic calling. And if they have domestic and international calling, they will get 600 minutes on top for the international calling. One interesting thing about the minutes is that they are being pooled within users in the same country in the same plan. So if you have two users, both are in France, both have domestic calling, and one user already consumed all the 1,200 minutes, but the other user has minutes left, the first user can use the minutes of that other user. If you would consume all your minutes and there are no minutes left anymore, emergency calling will still be working. So if users have an emergency, they call the emergency phone number, this call will still go through. And consumption-based billing, we will be talking about consumption-based billing in the next slide, can be used in case of all minutes already being consumed. One additional item of interest are premium rate numbers. Premium rate numbers, where you need to usually pay a premium fee to call them, they are not part of the PSTN calling service. So all calls to premium rate numbers will be blocked by the service. So let's talk about the consumption-based billing that we just talked about. In general, it's an optional feature. So you don't need to have it, but there are a number of scenarios where it's very useful to have it. The first one is conferencing dial out. So if your user is having a conference and someone wants to dial out from the conference to a region or a country that's not included in the PSTN conferencing subscription, then you need to pay for that, and consumption-based billing will be used. Also, consumption-based billing will be used if you want to provide toll-free numbers for conferencing dial-in, call queues, or auto-attendant. So toll-free numbers, the caller will not have to pay for calling these numbers. You will have to pay, and you will pay for it by using consumption-based billing. And finally, it can be used for users who are using Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. So if they are calling a phone number in a country or region that's not included in the PSTN calling subscription, then they can pay with that. You can pay for that with consumption-based billing. And also if you have users who have only a domestic plan, but you want these users to call international, also consumption-based billing can be used. Funding options, you can do either a one-time funding, where just dedicate an amount of money one time for these services, or you can set it up for auto recharge. I highly recommend to set it up for auto recharge, because if you have one-time funding and you run out of money and you forget to recharge it, then these services won't work anymore. So users won't be able to dial in or dial out to these countries and regions not included in the conferencing subscription. Your call queues, the auto attendant will not work anymore if you're using any toll-free numbers for these services. Phone numbers and porting. Cloud PBX with PSTN calling allows you to either bring your own phone numbers or to get new numbers from Microsoft. If you want to have new phone numbers from Microsoft, it's a super simple process. You just go to the website, you search by country, state, area code for the numbers you want, and then you can add them to your organization's inventory. You can acquire actually more numbers than you have licenses for to give you some headroom for planning, and we'll go into more detail on how many numbers you can acquire on the next slide. However, you can also bring your own phone numbers, and that will allow users to keep having the same phone number, so they don't need to update their contacts, no need to print new business cards. The same phone number will be used, but now it will terminate against Skype for Business Online, and the users will be able to receive their calls on their Skype for Business endpoints, including hard phones, IP phones. If you want to keep your own phone numbers, then you need to create a porting request, and we will address that also in the following slides. Before we get into the details on how many numbers you can acquire, let's spend a few moments on service numbers. Service numbers look exactly like user numbers. However, they support a high number of concurrent calls. Imagine you have services like dial-in conferencing, auto attendant, or call queues. You have potentially hundreds of people calling at the same time to a single phone number. Service numbers are configured in the backend so that they can handle this high number of concurrent calls. You can use for service numbers toll or toll-free phone numbers. And as we have discussed before, toll-free numbers require consumption-based billing because someone needs to pick up the bill. You can have new service numbers from Microsoft where we give you this phone number, or you can port over your existing service numbers if you need to. How many phone numbers can you get? So it depends if we're talking about user numbers or service numbers. For user numbers, there's a very simple formula that you can use. It is the number of domestic plus the number of domestic and international voice calling plans that you have times 1.1 plus 10. So let's assume that you have 50 licenses for domestic calling or domestic and international calling. So that means you have 50 times 1.1 plus 10. So you will end up with 65 phone numbers that you can reserve through the system, which means that in this example, you would have a headroom of 15 phone numbers that you don't need to assign to any user at this point of time. For service numbers, it's a little bit different. Again, we're looking at the number of licenses, but this time we're looking at the number of licenses for Cloud PBX and for PSTN conferencing. And there is no specific formula. Instead, we have this table, and it depends on the number of licenses you have. So looking at the table on the left side, if you have between 1 and 24 licenses, then you will be able to get 5 toll numbers and in addition 5 toll-free numbers. Then looking further, if you have, for example, between 100 and 149 licenses, then you can get 40 numbers. The full table is actually here, but you can find it also at the URL aka.ms/cloudpbx-numbers. And I would recommend before you do any planning to go to the URL and check that the table hasn't changed in the meantime. If you want to keep your existing numbers, then you need to port them over to Skype for Business Online. In order to prepare for the port, it's important that you do not disconnect your services with your current carrier. They still need to be in service, responsible for the phone number, so that they can participate in the porting request and help to getting your phone number ported over. At the same time, there should be no freeze on your account. So please check with your current provider that everything is in order. You should also turn off any special carrier side features for the numbers. If there's distinctive ring, configured centric services, ISDN, DSL lines, all of these features might make the porting request more complex or block it completely. And then you need to create a port request. All numbers within a port request need to be from a single carrier. So if you have multiple carriers, you need to create at least one porting request per carrier. And please get sure that the numbers are not already part of an existing port request. You need to have your company name, address matching exactly the losing carrier file. So whatever you put on file for the losing carrier, that needs to match what you have in the porting request. You need to have a billing telephone number, which is basically a phone number that identifies you as the person in charge. And you need to have the account number, PIN and passcode if you have anything set up. You also need a letter of authorization signed by the authorized party that proves that these numbers can be ported. And then finally, you can choose between a full port, where no numbers are being left behind, where all numbers are ported over, or a partial port, where you're just moving some of the numbers from the losing carrier. On this slide, you can see an example for number porting. So this is the Office 365 admin portal, and we are currently in the middle of a number porting request. Please note that you can only port numbers using the portal in the US. If you want to port numbers in different areas, such as France or the UK, you will need to open a support ticket. But here in this dialog on this web page, you can actually type in the phone numbers, either one phone number at a time, or as you can see in the third row, you can also specify ranges of phone numbers. Important, this way you can port a maximum of 999 phone numbers. If you have more, then you need as well to open a service request. Also note at the bottom there are these radio buttons where you can decide if you want to transfer all your phone numbers or just a subset of phone numbers. So, types of porting. There's standard porting, then there's a project porting, and there is complex porting. The first two, if you're in the US, you can do via the admin center in Skype for Business. For the complex porting, you need to open a ticket with the help desk. So standard porting is everything that is fewer than 100 phone numbers. There is a single billing telephony number, there's a single address, a single losing carrier, and a single rate center. This is usually done within 7 business days if there's no rejection for the port order. So that's quite simple. The little bit more complex one is the project porting, where we're talking about more than 100 phone numbers, but it's still less than 1,000 phone numbers. Again, there's a single billing telephone number, there's a single address, a single losing carrier, and a single rate center. This requires manual handling on the Office 365 side, so that's why it takes a little bit longer, 3 to 4 weeks, again, assuming that there are no rejections for the port order. And this can also be accomplished for US numbers using the admin center. And then finally, there is the complex porting. This is when you have more than 999 phone numbers. There can be multiple billing telephone numbers. There can be multiple addresses. Still, it's a single losing carrier. If you have multiple losing carriers, well, then you need to create multiple of these requests. But there can be multiple rate centers. This also requires manual handling. It's generally accomplished also between 3 and 4 weeks, assuming that there are no rejections for the port order. However, since this is complex, you will always have to open a support ticket with the help desk to get this done. We also recommend, especially if this is the first time that you're porting numbers from one carrier to another, that you do early in your project a test of maybe one number or a few more so that you can learn about the process and that you can also test if all the information that you provide is sufficient to support the process and if it is correct. Don't wait until the last minute and try to migrate all the phone numbers at the same time. Do these tests early so that you know when you need to migrate the phone numbers, it will just work. Emergency service dialing. Skype for Business allows you to dial emergency phone numbers directly from the Skype for Business client. However, there's a location required so that the numbers can be routed correctly to the emergency calling service center. So depending on the region or country, this location needs already be defined, either when the number is acquired or when it's assigned to a user. In the US, for example, you need to specify the location whenever you assign a phone number to the user. In other regions, like France, you need to define the location already when you acquire the number, since this number will then be attached to this specific location. So it's important that before you acquire your phone numbers and assign it to users, that you create your locations already up front. Also interesting to know is the different calling behavior. For rich clients, the Mac client and the Windows client, whenever you call an emergency number, the call will be placed from within the Skype for Business client. However, on the mobile clients, if you call emergency numbers, they will be sent through the mobile carrier directly to provide a better service. So let's take a look at the flow of emergency service dialing. Please note that this diagram is specific to the US. However, I will point out all the differences to other countries and regions. So at the very left, we can see that the administrator, and before the administrator assigns a phone number to a user, the administrator creates the location. That's step one. Step two is that this address is validated against the Master Street Address Guide to get sure that this address really exists. This is the first difference that we have from US to other regions. In other regions, there is no Master Street Address Guide, so we are just using Bing Maps to validate that this is an address that really exists. So now, back to the left, step number 3. A user is now assigned to the phone number and the location, and this information is stored in step 4 in the ALI, in the automatic location identification, that will be used in case of emergency to find out where a user is located. So now the user is completely configured, but has not placed an emergency call yet. That's what we're going to look at next. Here, the user in step 5 is dialing the emergency phone number and is connected to a so-called call screener, an operator who confirms the address with the caller and transfer the call to the PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point. And this is also a big difference between the US and other countries. In other countries, this call would always go directly to the emergency service that's local to the address. So we wouldn't have a call screener. This is happening only for US calls. Nevertheless, let's continue with the US call. So the address is confirmed, and now this address is, after being confirmed, being sent to a dispatcher and sent to the emergency service. So now the user is connected to his local emergency services. Let's take a look at some additional configurations. Let's start with taking a look at dial plans. Dial plans are used to normalize phone numbers. So for example, a user in the US doesn't want to dial the +1 area code for the US. They just dialing 555-123-456. Now, Skype for Business uses a dial plan to normalize this phone number to a full E164 phone number, including the plus with the area code. So the phone number is normalized to +1 555-123-456, and now Skype for Business can route this phone number correctly. Today, all the dial plans are pre-configured based on the defined user location. So for a user who is based in the US, we would do this normalization to normalize to US phone numbers. If the user is somewhere outside the US, UK or France, for example, then we would assume that the user is dialing a phone number in the respective country and the normalization would look different. Today, all these dial plans are pre-configured, so you cannot change them. However, we are planning to introduce these tenant or custom dial plans. They are in preview. So if you are interested, go to skypepreview.com and you can sign up for this new feature. And that will then allow you to allow users to even not have to dial the city code, or they might even just dial short extensions, and you can normalize that to full E164 phone numbers. Outgoing caller ID manipulation. If a Cloud PBX user calls someone on the PSTN, the phone of the called person will show the phone number of the caller. This is something that you can change. There is the PowerShell command. It's listed here. It's the get CS caller ID policy to see the policy, or if you want to change it, it would be set CS caller ID policy, and you can change the caller ID to a different phone number. So for example, you could replace it with the phone number of your company so that it's not, if someone wants to call back, it person doesn't see the phone number of the individual person that it was called from, but the head number of your office, which would then go to some kind of auto attendant or receptionist. Or you could also block the caller ID, then the called person would see it's an unknown caller. And you can do that for your whole organization, for individual users, or also for service numbers. Okay, let's take a look how Cloud PBX with PSTN calling looks in action. So now we're looking at the Office 365 admin portal. So an administrator has signed in, went to the Skype for Business online configuration, went to the voice settings, and now wants to create, wants to enable a user for Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get a new number. So you can see here on the left, we are in the voice submenu, clicked on the phone numbers, and now we are choosing new user number because we want to create the phone number for a user. If we would want to get a phone number for a service, then we would obviously choose the new service numbers. Now, on the right side, you can see the next window that comes up. Now we need to choose in what country do we want to be, what's the region, and what's the city. And that will help us to get numbers with the same, with the area code that we need. After choosing the country and the region, we have now to choose the city. And as you can see here in this example, we have chosen United States and California, and then you can see all the area codes and the city where phone numbers are available. So for example, you can see here 6 times Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure that if you scroll down, there are even more, but these are all the different area codes where we have phone numbers available in Los Angeles. You can also, on the left side, see the quantity of how many numbers you can acquire. So you just add here the number of how many, well, the amount of how many phone numbers you want to get, and we choose 5 and go to the next screen. And now on the right, you can see we have chosen Irvine, United States, and we have these 5 phone numbers. And now using the checkbox, you can decide if you want specific phone numbers or not. So if some phone number doesn't appeal to you, you just don't select it, and then you can go through the process again to get a different set of phone numbers. So now that we have the phone number reserved, we need to create the emergency address, because as we have learned before, in the US, if you want to assign a phone number to a user, at the time you assign the phone number to the user, you need to specify the emergency address of this user. I also want to highlight, as mentioned before, that in Europe, that might be different. In France, for example, you need to create first the emergency location, so that when you acquire the phone number, that you can already assign it to the specific emergency location, because phone number and emergency location in France need to be paired. But since we're doing here a US phone number, we're doing it in that sequence. So on the left, you can see that we put in a new address. So we are assuming that we are here in Redmond Building 41, Microsoft, that's in the United States. There's the street number 15571, and then we put in the street name, Northeast 31st Street, Redmond, Washington, and the zip code. Now we press the validate button, and now it goes against this master address database and validates the address. It looks up if this is really an address, and we get back this message that the exact address was not found, so it has been modified. So if you compare the left and the right, then you can see that the street name is now in a little bit different format. But now we have exactly the same format as it is in the master address database. So we can get sure that if emergency services are called, that they know exactly where this person is located. So the emergency location is listed here now under emergency locations. And now we can also select where within that building the person is located. And we can see that at the moment there are 0 users assigned, but we created this emergency location of building 41 and floor 1, and then the room where the person will be located. Now, the only missing step is to assign the phone number to a user. So in the gray area on the left, you can see that Brian Nice, the user, is selected. So we are in the menu for voice users, and we chose now to assign a phone number. Then the menu on the right will pop up where you can assign a phone number. It will tell you that there are 5 phone numbers that are available to assign for. So apparently we have reserved 5 phone numbers. And then at the same time, you need to assign the emergency location. Again, it tells you here that there are 2 emergency locations already configured, so you need to pick one of those. Then there will be the emergency disclaimer. Please read the emergency disclaimer carefully to understand how emergency calling is different in the scenario of Cloud PBX with PSTN calling, and it goes here through all these points. So it will tell you that the emergency service center might not know the exact location of the user due to the nature of Skype for Business, because the user might be working from the emergency location, or the user might be sitting at home, be traveling, be at a customer somewhere else. So there will be situations where an operator might ask the user for the exact location to find out where the user is. Also, if there is no power or no internet, well, then the Skype for Business won't work, and then you won't be able to place an emergency call. And then finally, if you're traveling internationally, then you probably shouldn't use Skype for Business at all to dial emergency numbers, since it won't be able to route you to an emergency center in the country. So once that has been done and agreed on, you can now see on the right that the number has been assigned. So Brian Nice has this assigned phone number. He's enabled for unified messaging. There's an emergency location, and everything is okay. And the user can start to place and receive phone calls. Some operational considerations. Please note that we won't go here into detail on operations. We have dedicated trainings for that. So for all the tools and in general on how to achieve health and maintain health for Skype for Business, there are dedicated trainings that you can find on Skype Academy, and we have also some of those listed in our resources section. However, we want to give you a quick overview so that you get a basic understanding how to do operations for Skype for Business Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. We already touched on network is important. It will directly affect the user experience. So if you have any latency, jitter, delay, all of that will make using Skype for Business not as pleasant. So get sure to leverage the Skype operations framework for the network readiness assessment. There's lots of guidance, there are trainings on that, so that you can truly understand how to achieve great network readiness for Skype for Business in order to achieve great quality. It's also important that you monitor your call quality, and this is best done via the call quality dashboard. There is a own training series that we're pointing to in the resources section that will help you to understand how to set up the call quality dashboard, how to use it, and how to interpret the data. If you ever experience any outage, first you should go to the Office 365 portal and check for the service status. It will tell you if there's a known outage. Then open a support ticket via support if required. If something doesn't work, just go to support, open a ticket, and you will be helped. This is an example of the tenant admin PSTN calling usage report. It will tell you for the last 90 days who called what phone number, at what time, what was the duration, what was the originating phone number and the destination phone number, what was the call type, inbound, outbound, call or conference, and you can export this information to a CSV for any offline data analysis, graphic, any retention policies that you might have. So Microsoft will give you all of this information so that you can truly understand what consumption is being done based on Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. And now the summary. The key learnings of these sessions are: Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is a service provided by Microsoft. So it's a one-stop shop for all your PSTN needs. You have only one bill, only one contract. There's only one portal where you configure everything. It is the best integrated option to deliver PSTN calling to your Skype for Business online users. Also very important, the service innovates on a constant basis, so stay up to date. Check back on Skype Operations Framework blog to learn about new releases, new trainings. There will be new features coming, and we are adding countries on a regular basis. Finally, networking is super important. Networking, again, will directly impact your user experience. So get sure to leverage the Skype Operations Framework for network readiness assessment. This slide contains trainings on Cloud PBX. There's an introduction training. There's a training on Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity via an existing pool. So if you already have Skype for Business and you want to leverage that existing pool to use your existing PSTN connection, that's how you do it. And remember, you can mix and match. So you can have some users using Cloud PBX with PSTN calling, and then having other users who use Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN connectivity via existing pool, which is a great option, for example, if you have users who are located in countries or regions where Cloud PBX with PSTN calling is not available yet. An alternative to Cloud PBX with on-premise PSTN calling via existing pool is using the Cloud Connector Edition. We have also a training on that, and the Cloud Connector Edition is a very small footprint server that you can deploy in your environment so that it can connect to an existing PSTN infrastructure. Additional trainings. I mentioned several times that there is in the Skype Operations Framework a SOF readiness assessment. You can find this on the Skype Operations Framework website. So please go there, please read all the material, please run network tests, please get sure that your network will be able to support real-time communication. I've also referred to the call quality dashboard. So there's the CQD training series that will walk you through the call quality dashboard, how you can see what the quality of your calls is, and how you can use this tool to monitor proactively against quality issues. Finally, I want to point out our community and blog. We are very interested in having active discussions with you around this training content. So please go to aka.ms/softcommunity, ask your questions, discuss with us and your peers so that we better understand what your training needs are. And then finally, there's the SOF and Academy blog. This blog will help you to stay up to date with all our releases around Skype Operations Framework and trainings. If we refresh this training or publish new trainings, you will read it first on the SOF and Academy blog, aka.ms/sof-blog. Thank you for attending this training.